Hi, and welcome everybody to our webinar series for cyber insurance for ransomware. This is Ted Sherrill. I'm the president of the ISACA Greater Houston chapter. Really appreciate y'all joining us. As y'all remember, some of you, we had a ransomware session about a month ago, and where we talked about ransomware attacks and what it was like to go through those. And we had a couple of IT executives, CIO, et cetera, talk about their experience with ransomware. And one of the things that they talked a lot about was the benefits of cyber insurance, not only for the indemnification, but also just working with the cyber insurers and how the requirements are increasing around that, et cetera. And that's what the feedback we got was that the participants wanted a lot more information around that exactly. So we're kicking off our 4-part session today. We have 2 excellent panelists that they're going to be sharing what they're observing, their thoughts and opinions, et cetera, within the industry right now. So we have Bridget Quinn Choi from Booz Hamilton, and she's one of the leaders for their ransomware practice over there at Booz Allen. And then we also have Heather Hughes from Resilience Insurance. And Resilience recently their organization recently met with Joe Biden around the issues around ransomware, doing assessments, et cetera. So very grateful to have these 2 ladies with us today. And again, I'll just be moderating the session, et cetera. So I would like them, since we're going to be, you'll be hearing from them directly. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so you can visually see them a little bit better. And I would like them to introduce themselves. So Heather, we'll start with you. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Resilience, and a little bit about the organization, please.
Thanks so much. I'm Heather Hughes. I'm located in Houston, Texas. I'm a recovering attorney. I spent about 20 years doing privacy work. I actually was an in-house HIPAA privacy officer for a very long time. And with healthcare, there are a lot of cybersecurity technical recommendations and requirements. So there was a natural progression into the cybersecurity world. About 4.5 years ago, I transitioned over to Strauss Friedberg at Aon. Strauss Friedberg is the cybersecurity consulting arm that Aon had purchased about 6 or 7 years ago. And there I was managing engagements that were proactive and reactive for cybersecurity. During COVID, during the 15 months of lockdown with COVID, it was almost exclusively managing ransomware engagements. So we were actually the digital forensic instant response teams that were doing the forensic work, working with outside counsel and working with the cyber carriers as well, to make sure that the companies were, getting good advice, working with ransom resolution experts, and then, getting their systems back up and running post-incident. I've been with Resilience Cyber Insurance since June. We only offer cyber insurance, but we also have a cybersecurity arm as well. So we have a large group of security engineers who are doing due diligence and helping our insureds, kind of stay ahead of the game with ransomware and other threat actor, actions that might go against our companies. So my role there is I head up client engagement. So those insureds that we are working with from a cyber insurance standpoint, I'm helping them kind of navigate, what changes they need to do to improve their cybersecurity posture.
Great, thank you, Heather. Really appreciate you taking time to be with us today. And so, Bridget, one of the nice things about webinars, if there is a nice thing, but one of the nice things is you don't have to be in Houston to attend. So, Bridget, I know you're there in New York, so I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what y'all do at Booz Allen.
Yeah, sure. So, located right outside New York City in beautiful Long Island. I started my career as an attorney. Most of the work that I did for 9 years when I was in private practice was insurance coverage litigation. So I represented insurance companies in litigating disputes with different policies. I pivoted over to an in-house position at an insurance company almost another 9 years ago. And in that role, they started running a new product called Cyber. And about 2012, I got to dive in and start my career handling cyber claims, helping drafting policy language, and really understanding and learning the full ecosystem of what cyber is and how it's evolving. The last 3 years, I pivoted over to digital forensics and incident response. I was general counsel and managing director of strategy for a digital response company. And 8 months ago, I pivoted over to Booz Allen. They called me up and wanted me to lead their incident response strategy group. So right now I am leading incident response strategy and helping victims of ransomware mostly respond and recover to these criminal attacks.
No, that's great. Thanks, Bridget. And thank you, Heather, for joining us. So really appreciate y'all being with us today and taking time. And I think this is a great session that kind of will lay the groundwork for the next few sessions. Again, tomorrow we will be back same time and Heather and Bridget will both be here. And we'll have a couple other people joining us. And we'll be talking about assessments tomorrow. And how do you go about doing assessments and what are the insurance companies looking for? Again, resilience is a real leader in this, which is one reason President Biden talked to them about it. And of course, Booz Allen Hamilton, they're one of the great preeminent advisors around doing assessments and et cetera. And so Bridget and Heather will be back for that. And we'll have a couple other people contributing. And then next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, we will have session 3 is around data exfiltration. That makes up about 40% of the extortion payments for ransomware. And that's copying your data out of your environment into the hacker's environment. And what are some best practices and controls to really focus on for that? And we'll have Bridget there. We'll have Marsh McLennan will be on that session, and we'll have a couple of other panelists too that will talk about that. NetFoundry and Oracle will be there. And then session 4, we're ending with the 800-pound gorilla, which is availability. It's a tough nut to crack, if you will, as far as how do you work to prevent it, detect it, minimize the damage, and really try to be resilient. And I'm really excited. We have Gartner is going to be a part of that, VM, Oracle, and just really a great NetFoundry, a great rundown of people that'll participate. But with that, so that's kind of our series. And I think it'll leave everybody with a good working knowledge. We are recording these sessions. They will be posted out on our ISACA YouTube channel. And again, you do receive CPE credit for these. And we will send a CPE certificate out by Monday, November 22nd. And it'll include all the sessions you attend. Most people signed up for all 4 sessions. So we're just going to wait and send one certificate that has your cumulative CPE credit instead of sending one for each session. So with that, I kind of want to get into our questions and let Bridget and Heather kind of address those. So, the first question, and Bridget, I'll throw it over to you first. I get asked a question a lot, why now, right? And I believe the COVID, unfortunately, provided a compelling event, if you will, or at least an event horizon with the lockdown and people having to work remotely, et cetera, that caused a great increase in ransomware attacks. And so I wanted to see, have you observed the same and what your thoughts were around kind of COVID being a precipice for this?
Well, I'll start off with a couple quick factotums, and then I'll dive into the COVID issue. So 2020 was a banner year for ransomware. Nearly 25 incidents reported to the FBI and $30 million in payments. And I would say most people don't report to the FBI, so that's a floor as opposed to a ceiling. To give you some out of band stats, 3,338 victims as of yesterday were publicly shamed for not paying a ransom. And that's over 2 years of the name and shame tactics that it started. Now, there are 52 variants that have been involved in the name and shame scheme. So you get an understanding of the breadth of the problem. Now, FinCEN is the organization within the Treasury that collects payment information on suspicious payments, and that would include ransomware. Now, all people don't report to FinCEN, but they do have great aggregating data. And they released a report a couple of weeks ago. What the report said is the highest paid ransomware families average this year alone, $30 to $76 million. So that's one criminal gang getting that much money. I mean, that's big business. I would like that kind of revenue in a half a year. Oh my goodness. So think about it. These criminal groups are getting tons and tons of capital. And how they operate, interestingly, is a lot like the American franchise system. So there's a ransomware brand, and the founders have the brand and they build structure, a playbook, methodologies, an encryption tool, a malware strain, and they sell this to the franchisees, right? And they're called affiliates. The affiliates carry out the attacks. And what they do is they take a slice of every ransom payment that is made, and they want to make more money. So how do they make more money? They become the top ransomware variant. Now you can see the top variant, 76 million in H1, that's enormous revenue. And that's underreported, that's a floor. So they're making tons, hand over fist cash. They're going to become more organized. They're going to become more innovative, and they're going to become more dangerous. And that's what they have done. Now, in perspective of the COVID situation, COVID presented them with a unique opportunity of an expanded attack surface. So people working from home are using, for example, remote desktop protocols and VPNs that have vulnerabilities. They probably aren't doing a lot of the employee awareness trainings. They might be using, for example, their Gmail on their home devices and putting that onto the corporate network and getting mal spam into the network. So these well-funded attackers in 2020 became even more well-funded because they seized on an opportunity that they saw just like any franchise would. So that's my perspective on the COVID attack. Yes, it presented with a unique vulnerability, but now these guys are super well-funded. Part because of what happened in 2019, part because of the opportunity of COVID that COVID presented.
Yeah, excellent, Bridget. Thank you for that. Heather, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that came up was, is it accurate that 83% of companies already pay ransomware? So, you hear about the big ones, right? You hear, Colonial Pipeline, which from our perspective wasn't really that big. Both Bridget and I talked that we've both worked engagements where, the ransom demand was over $30 million. And so anecdotally, in the hundreds of ransomware engagements I've worked, probably 75 to 80% of the companies paid. And they paid either because they didn't, their backups were encrypted and, they were dead in the water, or they paid because maybe they did have backups, but it was going to take them, 4 to 6 weeks to build back. And the lost revenue in that time was more than the ransom demand. And then there's a hybrid where a company may say, we don't need to pay the ransom because, we have our backups, we can bring them back up, in 3 days. But then the threat actors say, well, but, we exfiltrated your data And instead of 10 million, you're going to need to pay us 3 million so that we don't publish that. And to Bridget's point, yeah, the threat actors, they are a business, to the point of when the ransom resolution experts are calling to negotiate the ransom, sometimes they're calling into a call center. It's great customer service. That you can follow the email streams back and forth. One piece of advice for everybody on the phone: never engage with a threat actor. Get a professional involved. I had one company, actually in the oil and gas business, where the ransom note, first of all, the ransom note came, usually it comes on your computer screen. This came via every printer, including all of the refineries, the outlying trailers and everything. So it used every piece of paper in every printer. So imagine walking in and all of your crew is walking in out in the fields and the floor is littered with this ransom note. So before they called their cyber insurance carrier, before they called the forensic experts, before they called a ransom resolution expert or their outside counsel, the CEO sends an email that basically said, there is no way in hell we are paying, you are terrorists, go to hell. Once the forensic investigation started, about 2 days later, they realized they would go out of business. Every single thing was encrypted, and they completely lost their bargaining power at that point. So then when the ransom resolution experts got in and started to try to negotiate down, threat actors were like, yeah, no, you started this off by saying you weren't even going to pay. So this is our price. This is what we demand. So what you hear about how many people are paying ransoms, that's those people, like Bridget said, who are actually reporting it, or it's hit the news. There's probably, hundreds, if not thousands, behind the ones that you hear in the news that never make the news, that nobody really knows about except the forensic experts.
Yeah, that's a great point, Heather. And I think, you said 75 to 80% of the customers you're dealing with are paying the ransom. And a lot of the organizations that are paying these ransoms, it's going unreported. And if you add those two factors together, insurance companies are not making a windfall profit from cyber insurance. And so they are for-profit companies. They're not charitable organizations. And so they're having to look to revise how they assess customers to ensure that they're making a wise bet on an organization as to who to, basically who's a good risk, right? And that's really what this series is about, is that the landscape quickly changed for cyber insurers. And I think one of the key, again, the key points of that was COVID and the lockdown and people working remotely. And all of a sudden, the ransomware attackers took advantage of that. It's cost the indemnifiers some of them are getting out of the business. Others are having to only partially indemnify, et cetera. And we'll be talking about that. But I just wanted to tie back to your points. I think they're well taken. And that's really why we had a lot of feedback to have this session to kind of cover this. So let me move on to the follow-up question. And these questions, we received a lot of these from people when they registered and they input the questions. We had a place where you could input questions for the sessions. So that's where we're pulling some of these. So Heather, I'll come back to you first with this one. How are you seeing ransomware extortion evolving? You talked a little bit about exfiltration and availability, the dual-sided threat. I know you kind of touched on this. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so, Bridget made the point that of the franchisees and the threat actors, sometimes there's several of them that are involved. So, one is going to send out the phishing link that might introduce some malware into your system, and then they may sell that foothold to another threat actor. And so then, you've got several different threat actor groups that have possibly, accessed your systems. And, what does that do from a ransom demand? And so, you may say, again, we have backups, we've got cloud backup, we're fine, but you don't know who's moved through your system. I know there was a question earlier in the chat about, are the insurance laws different? And yeah, so the insurance laws are different. the data breach notification laws are different in all 50 states as well. And so if the threat actor has been in your systems and has accessed personal, sensitive, financial, confidential information, dependent on how that state defines that. And side note, it's the state that the consumers live, not the state where your businesses are. So then it becomes a big nightmare. That comes into play as well. And the threat actors know that. The other thing that the threat actors are doing while they're moving around your system, sometimes for 3, 6, 9 months before they ever deploy the ransomware, is they're looking through your files to see if you have cyber insurance. And we have seen an uptick of the ransom demands being the exact amount of the cyber insurance coverage. So you have $5 million in coverage, guess what? Your ransom demand is going to be $5 million because the threat actors know that you have the coverage for that. I will tell you from a cyber insurance standpoint, what we're seeing in the market is more and more carriers are saying, okay, we want to see that you have some controls in place before we ever consider covering you. And if you don't have controls that are good enough or up to our standards, we'll give you cyber insurance, but we're going to give you a ransomware sublimit that's really low. So yeah, you might have cyber insurance that covers a business email compromise, financial crimes, things like that. But if you get a ransom demand, some cyber carriers will say, we're not covering that, or we'll cover it at $100,000 or $200,000. But the cyber, know that the cyber threat actors they're reading through your documents before they make the demand.
No, that's great. So, and we did have a question in chat before we get off of you, Heather. The question was, are there a framework like NIST, or does resilience, do y'all look for adherence to a specific framework like COBIT, NIST, et cetera, in order for people to qualify for indemnification?
So I will agree with Bridget's answer. It depends on the carrier. We are looking more for what security features you have. And most cyber carriers are asking and some demanding that you have multi-factor authentication and you have some point of endpoint detection and response. Some are even requiring that you have a SOC or SIM. And what they want to see is that you have an alert that's going to let you know that you have a threat actor or an indicator of compromise in your system. And of course, the first round of defense is multi-factor authentication. It can reduce your risk of getting hit by a threat actor by up to 80%, because almost all ransomware and malware comes in through some sort of phishing scheme. Now, there are brute force attacks, of course, but carriers are looking for MFA, EDR, and then they will go down further depending on the carrier. And it also, it depends really on your industry too. So we're going to look at NIST for some certain industries. We're going to look at HIPAA and high tech for healthcare, obviously. But know that there are some gold standards that almost all cyber carriers are looking for now, and that is MFA and EDR.
Okay, yeah, no, excellent. So Bridget, we'll throw it over to you around the evolution of ransomware. What are y'all observing at Booz Allen Hamilton?
Very similar to what Heather said. We're seeing that because they're investing in themselves and their success. They're seeing what drives success, and multi-layered duress is successful. Creating a situation where the victim feels like they have no other option but to pay. And how they do that is not just by encrypting your system and deleting your backups. They will also steal data and hold it hostage and threaten to publish it for the world to see. They may call, say you're a hospital, they may call people whose records they found and start telling them that there's an attack. They might call the CEO of your company and say, we're going to do bad things. We have all of your secret information. They might DDoS you. And what that means is they're just going to ping your website until it's inoperable as another tactic to create duress, to force you to pay. They will take anything. Now, one thing to understand about these attackers is, people are like, oh, do they target, this one over that one? Am I safe? No. If you have access, if you have digital access and vulnerability, you are not safe. They target vulnerabilities. They go to and find more vulnerable networks, because more vulnerable networks are easy and more efficient. So going back to the franchise model, the playbook will say, listen, we make just as much money attacking a small company and getting a big ransom because they have cyber insurance as we do a big company that has larger defenses. So putting forth basic barriers does thwart a lot of ransomware. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the evolution of, they're finding the weakest link. They're finding, the end of the herd to attack first. And they are using every sort of pain point and pressure to create chaos, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and force this company to feel like they must pay. It's a really hard situation for a victim company, and anyone who gets on their soapbox and is like, I would never pay, does not understand the circumstance.
Yeah, that's a great point. So let's talk about, I think, a natural evolution of that question. When you talk about the pressure to pay, et cetera, let's talk about, Bridget, OFAC real quick. And if what do you do if somebody's on that list? And maybe you can talk a little bit about OFAC and help our participants kind of understand better the implications of that.
Sure. So generally speaking, paying a ransom is lawful but awful. And I should make that very, very clear. It is not good to pay a ransom ever. These are criminal organizations that not only invest in themselves, they invest in, and we have seen evidence of this on the blockchain, child exploitation, human trafficking, drug trafficking. This is not going to underprivileged women's schools in underdeveloped nations. This is going to bad things, right? So it's always bad to pay. So what is the unlawful payment? What awful but lawful, but what is the exception? That's OFAC, right? So OFAC is the Office of Foreign Asset Control. It is an arm of the US Treasury. And what OFAC does is it puts out embargoes and specifically designates states, people, wallets who are so dangerous and are so impactful to national security that a payment to this actor is sanctioned and you may not do it. So this is the line in the sand that the government draws. And what do you do when you're faced with an attack? And particularly those of you in critical infrastructure, this could be an OFAC attack, right? This could be something where there's a nexus and a state actor or someone who the government has designated is attacking you. So what do you do? Well, the first thing you have to do in any ransomware attack is get some sort of due diligence on the attacker. Get the threat intelligence, get the technical evidence that you need to make a decision as to whether you can pay or you cannot pay. Now, OFAC just came out with an advisory in October, and it realizes, right, that you might be in a bad situation. You might be, let's just say, in critical infrastructure, a hospital, where life and human safety is that issue if you don't pay. So it doesn't matter, there's two horrible situations that could befall you, right? If you don't get this decryptor, and you might be in a very bad situation. So they say a mitigating factor to those who unwittingly pay is if you cooperate with law enforcement and you have an incident response plan and a maturity established to show that you didn't just, have no controls and no plan and you got yourself in this situation. You did everything you could to not get there. And then when you got there, you called the FBI and you said, listen, we have this incident. That way, the quantum of the problem is known. Law enforcement can do what it needs to do and maybe even help you augment, if you contact Health and Human Services. Maybe they're starting to develop a program, because this is something I've heard in some of the think tanks, to augment medical staff when there's a ransomware attack and it's down. So you could do a pop-up tent hospital like they did in New York for COVID and continue operations and provide critical services, right? But you can't do that if you're hiding the fact that you're attacked. So that's some of the factors that OFAC looks at. Another thing that, this is not legal advice, this is something that has been purported as an idea, is some of the attorneys are suggesting that you go to the DOJ if you're in one of those untenable situations and get a consent order. So you fall on your sword. You say, listen, we've identified that this is potentially an OFAC nexus. We have to make the payment or we're gonna, not be able to function. Done. Here, what the DOJ is going to do is really take everything about the incident, and you're really gonna have to cooperate, and they will give you a consent judgment to pay. So that is some of the options out there. What I would recommend to do, knowing that this is a risk, is prepare to not have to pay. Don't find yourself in this situation. Don't pay bad criminals. Don't pay criminals who can impact national security. Like, they're not there for no reason. And how you do that is you look to business continuity, disaster recovery, and crisis management. If you don't have plans in place and you're not testing those plans, you are absolutely vulnerable. And those who do have those plans in place have the ability to reject the ransom demand. And, it's been studied, it's been established. It's just very hard to do.
No, that's great to hear. And one thing, Bridget, when you and I personally talked, that I thought was interesting was the reality is these ransomware attackers work really hard to stay off the OFAC list because they kind of want to get paid. So.
Well, the interesting thing is, okay, so you talk to attorneys who, aren't really seasoned in this practice, and they're like, oh, you just look on the list. You'll not find any ransomware variants on the list, 0. You'll find some wallets. You will find criminal groups that may have a connection to some of the ransomware variants, but if you go in and you put REvil in there, you're not going to find any REvil. Now, we know, for example, like the SamSam group, they're connected to Iran. Iran has a trade embargo with the United States, right? If you put SamSam group in there, you will not find them on the SDN list. That is not the way the list works. You have to have a risk framework that identifies risk factors and red flags, that builds an evidence matrix for you to say, ooh, this is too risky to pay. Because you're never going to say, you are very, very rarely, I won't say never, you very, very rarely going to have this smoking gun evidence that says, oh, this is obviously an OFAC actor. They purposely obfuscate who they are, where they come from, and it's very, very difficult to know, particularly on the fly.
Yeah, good point. So Heather, anything you want to add to that?
So I will agree, they don't want to be on the OFAC list. And a great example, last fall, DarkSide was, hitting everybody. Of course, DarkSide is, we all know them from Colonial Pipeline, but before Colonial Pipeline, there was some chatter that they were maybe going to have a data center in Iran. And so there was like some Twitter, and I'm like, this is the cyber geeks all like chatter about, well, if they open a data center in Iran, they're going to be on the OFAC list. DarkSide themselves came out with a press statement. We are not opening a data center in Iran because they knew if they're on the OFAC list, they're out of business. No one can pay them. Obviously, they want to be paid. So they're doing everything they can to not get on that OFAC list. Of all of the ransomware events that I worked, only one of them truly was on the OFAC list. It turned out that company didn't have to pay anyway, but they had the ransom resolution experts involved from day one, which I actually recommend because, and our company recommends that as well, because they can communicate with the threat actors, even if you have no intention of paying, because it will stall them. They do not like to be ignored. And we even had a case where, they knew they weren't going to pay. The role of the company was, we are not communicating at all. Threat actors, just ignore them. We're going to do our forensic investigation and we're going to pull up from backups. So the threat actors started calling employees. calling employees that worked at the company. Hey, your CEO doesn't care about your personal information because we have it and they're not paying us. So then not only were they getting pressure from the threat actor, they're getting pressure from their own employees. Like, what do they mean? What do they have? They have my social security number. What do they have? So, even if you have no intention of paying, that's some of my advice too. Let the ransom negotiators and the ransom threat experts do any sort of communication, and they are communicating as if they are you. So there will be a lot of, we need board approval. We don't have access to that kind of funds right now, because sometimes the ransom note will say you have 48 hours. And so they'll say, I need 5 days, I need 7 days. And obviously you need that time. So the forensic investigation can tell you, okay, this is where the threat actors moved with your system. These systems are clean. They don't have indicators of compromise. You can bring those back up. So you're having the experts work along your own internal InfoSec team, while someone else is kind of holding the threat actor at bay.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I know, Heather, when you and I were talking, and this was a question that we received, should you already have an existing relationship with a professional negotiator that deals with these ransomware attacks, et cetera? Can you shed any light on that? I mean, how does Resilience handle that? Is that a service y'all provide, or what do y'all do?
So all cyber insurance carriers have panels that are approved, which means they've negotiated the pricing. And so, whether it is Beasley or Resilience or Chubb or any other cyber carrier, they are going to tell you, okay, these are our approved panel vendors. We have a panel requirement. Now, that doesn't mean that if you have a favorite forensic provider or a favorite privacy firm that they won't, write those in for your policy, but there's not really a need. There's not a need, in my opinion, to have a Bitcoin wallet as a company, and there's not a need to have a relationship with a ransom resolution expert or a forensic provider, unless they're already on your cyber panel for your cyber insurance. And then by all means, get a $0 master services agreement with them so that you have that papered up, so you're not sending red lines back and forth in the middle of a ransomware event where maybe your email's down, your phone is down. But I wouldn't just go out and seek out a ransom resolution expert, especially if you have cyber insurance, because you may have a relationship with someone that then your cyber carrier goes, yeah, we're not paying for them. So check with your policy first, and then and know that the cyber carriers have all done their due diligence as well. So like Bridget's company is on most cyber carriers panel for a reason. They're great. I came from Strauss Friedberg. They also are on many panels. So you will see the same names pop up on many of the different cyber panels because they are the known experts in ransomware, forensic DFIR, digital forensic incident response, and the ransom resolution negotiation.
That's excellent. So Bridget, you want to add anything about the negotiators and the panels, et cetera?
Yeah, a trend that I'm seeing, and I think is a positive trend, is that insurers want you to be comfortable, and they want you to act with intent and act with speed, because that's super important to a positive resolution and good management of an incident. So they make available who is on their panel, and they allow you to start building a relationship. They may offer proactive services with folks on their panel, so you can start building that relationship. So when the incident comes, you report to your carrier and you say, I want Straws, I want Booz, whoever you want, whoever you have built that relationship with. And the carrier, obviously, they're on their panel, they say yes. The other thing that you should take into consideration is being on a panel gives you a large volume of work. That gives you a specific seasoning and experience that others who don't do it regularly just don't have. So you get a broad understanding of what's going on in the market, what works and doesn't work. You're getting the best specialists out there. You're getting folks who do this day in and day out. And that's so important for a good resolution. It's not just the negotiations, it's the IR strategy. It's the how to rebuild your system with efficiency. These folks are trying out new techniques and tools and know the state-of-the-art method to get it done in the best way, the fastest way, and with this variant and with this encryption system. So I would say your carrier really does have, it's in their interest and it's in your interest to understand who's on the panel, get to know them, and use them.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I want to transition real quick into another, and I've seen a couple of chat points on this, but another question we received. And every time I talk about crypto, I just get sad that I did not invest in it. That's all I know. So I had a son about 10 years ago try to get me to invest in Bitcoin, and I chose not to do it, and unfortunately. But so the question is, does it make sense? We've talked a lot about payments. Should someone already have a crypto wallet set up in order to, should an organization already have a crypto wallet and all that set up in order to be able to make payments quickly, so that if they really feel like they need to get a critical system back up and running quickly, or whatever the circumstance may be. So Bridget, maybe you can talk a little bit about the crypto wallets and just, payments and your thoughts on that.
So a couple of things that you're going to want to do. So your insurance carrier will have ransomware resolution experts, expert negotiators who know what they're doing. They will also have money service businesses and crypto brokers on their panel for you to use. And what's the importance of using a money service business? Okay, so money service business is a company that takes fiat currency, so cash, and turns it into crypto. And those people who do that are regulated by the Bank Secrecy Act. Now, if you're a publicly traded company or not, or just subject to regulations and scrutiny, you're going to want to do things in the light of day. You're not going to want to use some off-brand, outside of the legal framework kind of vendor. Your insurance carrier will provide that for you. So they're going to provide someone who is registered with FinCEN as a money service business. You're going to get a clean and appropriate transaction with all the AML and reporting requirements that come with it. And that's why you don't do it beforehand, because you're not going to do it right. You're going to want to make sure that it's a clean wallet. There's a whole host of risk factors with you as a corporation sending money to a criminal attacker. All that is taken out of your hands and dealt with in a professional manner. And that's one of the really huge benefits of having an insurance policy that is designed for the risk.
Yeah, excellent. That's a very good point. Heather, I'll toss the ball over to you. What are your thoughts on crypto wallets and payments, et cetera?
Oh, I mean, so Bridget said it all. There are experts out there. You pay the experts. They're going to run that threat actor group through OFAC. They're going to give you a report. Because if you are going to report back to the FBI, they're going to want to see that, or any other, or the Secret Service, depending on who you're reporting to, they're going to want to see the OFAC report before any payment is made. Your board of directors may want to see a report that you didn't pay a sanctioned entity. And so there's, in addition to all the protections that Bridget mentioned, it's not a great idea just to have a Bitcoin wallet just in case you get attacked. This is why there are companies that do this all day, every day. And one more point with that, Bridget said these, especially the companies that are on the panels, they're chosen for a reason because it's all they do. So you can find a local company in a small town that says, yeah, we do instant response. They don't do 100 instant responses a month. They just don't. And so the reason that you want a company that does that many is they know the indicators of compromise that are used. They can tell you from the ransom note who the threat actor group is, and then they can say, okay, well, this is ABC threat actor group. They always exfiltrate data. So let's start planning for that. Or, well, we can typically negotiate their ransoms down by 30%. Or, this group hardly ever exfiltrates data. They threaten to, but we've never seen anything on the dark web. So all of that intel, you get along with the same service of the companies that are saying, yes, we will take your money and transfer it into Bitcoin, and we will facilitate payment to the threat actor. And I know there was a question about, if we just get rid of cryptocurrency, will this kill it? They're terrorists. No, they'll figure out another way to get paid.
Right. I wish it was that easy, right? So So, and I have seen some questions around what are the controls that are needed in order to get indemnification, et cetera. That's really our next session. It is going to cover that tomorrow. So we're not going to spend time on that today. I hope y'all can join us back tomorrow for that. But I did want to point that out. But there is a point, Bridget, I think you brought this up to me and I had not seen it, that speaks to that a little bit that we can cover today, which was the DOJ's announcement on the False Claims Act. And I don't know if you wanted to speak to that. I had not seen that come across, but about basically if you're doing business with the government or, or maybe a subsidiary of the government, and you claim to have maybe controls that you do not, there could be an issue there. Bridget, you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, so I mean, to put it in perspective, this administration is looking to be very strong in cybersecurity. And that's with among the agencies. That's not just, it's with the FDA, it's with the FTC. Every letter agency that has a finger in cybersecurity is coming out and flexing. The DOJ is the enforcement arm for a lot of these agencies. It is no exception. And what the DOJ just recently announced was that they are going to use the power behind the False Claims Act to start prosecuting entities that purport to be, let's just say, ISO compliant with X, Y, and Z, right? And they're putting that, and they're getting the trust of their customers. They're getting the trust of the government. They're being entrusted with secrets. And then they're attacked, and then it's discovered that, oh, wait, they weren't compliant. It was wrong. That's going to be one of their major objectives. So, as always, anything that you purport to be, particularly in cybersecurity, this is a part of the agenda for the DOJ. They are aggressive. They do not want people, they want fair, and they want consumers and the government to know if you really do have a mature posture or not, and be able to make good business decisions on that. So keep that in mind when you're getting these assessments. Don't do a in-house assessment because maybe it wasn't done appropriately. Get it from a reputable person and make sure what you say you are is absolutely true.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's a great setup for our session tomorrow because Booz Allen Hamilton provides assessments. I know Resilience, Heather, y'all provide some form of assessments for customers as well that are seeking cyber insurance, et cetera. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. So please tune back in because just as we were talking about, there can be serious implications if you do not do your assessments correctly and you purport to have mitigation controls that maybe you don't. So, and it's important that you realize that, and really that the executive and the board realize that as well. So our last question that we'll get to today is the road ahead, right? And how do you expect ransomware, based on what you've seen and just your personal opinions and thoughts, how do you expect ransomware to continue to evolve? Heather, I'll throw that over to you first to see what your thoughts are on that, just kind of the looking down the road with ransomware.
So the threat actors take advantage of the fact that we still have hundreds of C-suites in companies going, yeah, I know we should do this, but it's really a pain. It's really a pain to have, multi-factor authentication. I don't want to sit through this stupid training. I don't have time. I've got meetings all day. The threat actors are counting on that. And I don't see it going away, unfortunately. Now, the problem is you have, a lot of boards saying you absolutely need cyber insurance, and the cyber carriers going, yeah, no, we're not going to do it anymore because we've been telling you for years you need these controls and we've paid out all these claims. So we're not going to insure you if you don't take these controls. So now, we're seeing a little bit of it's trickling in. Well, we do MFA, but not on privileged accounts. Well, then you might as well not have MFA. Or, we do once a year training for our employees, except for, these 50 people because they don't have time. Who do you think the threat actor is not going after your secretary? The threat actors are going after the CFO. And, back to how COVID was affected, the threat actors, no matter how much phishing training you give your employees, the threat actors know what the US workplace was doing during COVID. So I got phishing emails, a month into the pandemic that said things like, click here for the work from home plan, or do you need equipment to work from home? Attached is the worksheet to request a chair or a standing desk or whatever. And it looked like it came, unless you clicked on the actual link to see where the email was coming from, a lot of people fell for that. And then testing, emails about COVID testing rolled out a couple months after that. Then we saw the vaccines. What we're seeing now is there's emails about mandatory vaccinations required by HR. And so it is things that will make your employees click on the links. So my point to that is your training needs to evolve with what the threat actors are doing. And the only way to do that is to use a reputable training company. So just having your IT people, meet once a year and go, don't click on links. That's not going to do it. You need real world phishing simulations with your employees. The threat actors are going to evolve, and we need to evolve with them.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So, Bridget, how do you view the road ahead for ransomware?
Well, I'll be doom and gloomy. I think the threat actors have shown proof of concepts that they can get into industrial controls. They have shown proof of concepts that they can affect operational technology as an end IT. So what you're going to see is more like Colonial Pipeline, which in that case, it didn't affect OT, but they turned off the OT. That actual physical harm is being done by ransomware. And what I think they're going to do, because this is their modus operandi, is they're going to pair it with some sort of political event or some sort of national event, so it has maximum impact. And probably in a few years with the election, there's probably going to be a major attack. Now, if you want to, we have to be prepared. We have plenty of time. So companies have to get their assessments, build their plans, and become resilient to these sort of attacks, because it really is a matter of national security. It's not just $5,000 ransoms anymore.
No, excellent. Well, I want to, that'll conclude today's session, and I'll put out in the chat. I'm sure most of y'all are registered for the session tomorrow. So tomorrow we are going to cover the risk assessments and focusing in on what are the primary controls that you need to have and utilize in order to get indemnification and try to be more resilient, just like Bridget was talking about, and Heather as well. So I really want to personally thank, I had done a lot of investigating to try to find the two people that I felt were really leaders in this segment around cyber insurance and ransomware. And Bridget and Heather were at the very top of that list, and they were very gracious to do this for us today. And luckily they'll be back with us tomorrow, which is very kind of them. So we want to personally thank both of y'all for sharing your time, and most importantly, your knowledge and experience in what you're observing with other customers. So it was an excellent topic. We are trying to not do PowerPoints on these sessions. We are trying to have interactive discussions. And as you can tell, we are monitoring the chat and the Q&A, and we try to address those as they come up. If we miss some, I'll follow up with those as well. Thank you all very much for attending. We really appreciate it. Everybody have a blessed day. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Thank you.